The train screeched as it rolled into the dusty frontier station, a lonely outpost surrounded by miles of open plains and shimmering heat. When the doors slid open, passengers hurried off, merchants eager to sell their wares, families traveling west, cowboys stretching their stiff legs after a long ride. In the middle of the commotion stood a young woman clutching a newborn child to her chest. Her dress was torn at the hem, her hair tangled, and her eyes wide with confusion and fear. She moved slowly, as though every step was a struggle. To anyone watching, she seemed like someone who had just woken from a nightmare she couldn't shake. She had no idea where she was. The station sign read Sagebrush Junction, but the letters swam in her vision. Her head throbbed from an injury she didn't remember receiving. She tried recalling her name, just her name, but the effort made her dizzy. All she knew was the weight of the baby in her arms, the small warm bundle who whimpered softly when she held him tighter. Instinctively, she rocked him, whispering nonsense in a voice that trembled. When she stepped off the train, she expected someone to follow, someone who knew her, someone who could tell her what to do. But the car behind her stayed empty. She turned back, panic rising, and reached for the door just as the conductor swung it closed. "Wait, please," she cried, her voice hoarse, but the whistle blew sharply, cold and final. Steam hissed over her boots. With a jolt, the train lurched forward, gathering speed until it was nothing more than a dark line drifting into the horizon. She stood frozen, half reaching, half cradling the baby, unable to move. The world felt too big, too loud, too bright. A gust of wind kicked up dust along the platform. The baby fussed, and she curled around him protectively. People on the platform began staring, some with curiosity, some with suspicion, some with pity. The station master, a stout man with a bristly mustache, frowned as he approached her. "You lost, miss?" he asked, not unkindly, but not gently either. "I don't know," she whispered. I need someone." "You got papers? A ticket? Someone expecting you here?" She shook her head helplessly. "I don't remember." The man's expression darkened with concern and something else. A stranded woman with a newborn, no luggage, no name, no answers. In a place like this that made her trouble. Trouble the sheriff didn't appreciate. "You, might need to come with me," the station master said, glancing toward the sheriff's office down the street. "We can sort out who you are." The woman tightened her hold on the baby, stepping back instinctively. "Please, no. I didn't do anything wrong." "Didn't say you did," he replied, "but can't have vagrants wandering around." The word vagrant struck her like a slap. Was that all she was now? A nameless, memory-lost woman with a child she wasn't even sure she had given birth to? Thunder rumbled in the distance. Dark clouds were starting to roll over the plains, promising a storm heavy enough to drown anyone caught without shelter. She looked around desperately. Every face turned away from her anxiously, as though helping her might somehow invite trouble into their own lives. She felt herself shrinking inside, collapsing under fear and exhaustion. Then, out of the shadowed corner of the platform, someone moved, footsteps slow, steady, purposeful. A tall figure emerged, broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, coat worn from long rides. He didn't look at the gawking crowd or the station master. His eyes were fixed only on her. For the first time since stepping off the train, she felt something other than fear. She felt seen. She didn't know his name. She didn't know her own. But she could sense something about him, quiet strength, and the kind of stillness only a man who had weathered storms had. He stopped a few steps away, and though he said nothing, the danger pressing in around her suddenly felt less sharp. The silent cowboy had arrived. The cowboy stood there like a solid piece of the landscape, quiet, unmoving, steady as the wooden beams of the station itself. Dust swirled around his boots, carried by the rising wind, but he didn't seem bothered by it. His hat cast a shadow over most of his face, yet his eyes were unmistakably fixed on the trembling woman clutching the newborn close to her chest. To the station master, his sudden approach was unexpected. To the crowd, it was unsettling. To the woman, it felt like a lifeline she didn't dare trust. He had the look of someone who didn't waste words, someone who only spoke when something mattered. And right now, something mattered. The station master cleared his throat. "Eli, didn't know you were in town today." The cowboy didn't answer. He didn't even nod. He simply shifted his weight slightly and took another step toward the woman. She watched him with wide, frightened eyes, unsure whether to move away or move closer. Something in his presence felt safe, but safety had been a stranger to her for too long. Eli Calder had a reputation, one built not from trouble, but from solitude. He was known across sagebrush as a man of few words, fewer friends, and an unshakable loyalty to the couple of people he cared for. He'd been through storms, loss, long winters, and a few too many gunfights that weren't his fault. People respected him, feared him a little, but trusted him completely. He stopped in front of the woman and lowered his gaze to the baby, whose soft whimpering was nearly lost beneath the howling wind. His expression softened in a way no one on the platform had ever seen from him. The woman felt tears sting her eyes. I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli lifted his head. Their eyes met. Something in his expression seemed to say, "You're not alone," but he didn't speak. Not yet. The station master coughed again, more impatiently this time. "Look, Eli, this woman needs talking to the sheriff." "Can't have." Eli finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, rough with disuse. "She's with me." The words dropped like stones into water, sending ripples across the stunned crowd. The woman blinked. I'm with you?" Eli didn't look at her. He kept his gaze steady on the station master, as if daring him to argue. And for a moment, the older man looked ready too. But there was something about Eli, quiet, unyielding, impossible to push, that made him think twice. "I didn't realize." The station master muttered. "Well, that changes things, I suppose." The woman's heart pounded. She didn't understand why this stranger, this silent, intimidating cowboy, was helping her. She didn't even know his name. But the tension in the air eased around her, and the crowd began to disperse now that the spectacle had ended. Eli finally turned to her. In the growing storm wind, his coat fluttered slightly. He spoke again, softer this time, but no less firm. "You hurt?" he asked. She swallowed. "I think so. I can't remember anything." He nodded slowly, as though that answer made sense, as though he'd already suspected as much. "You got somewhere to go?" Her throat tightened. "No." Another nod. No judgment. No hesitation. He reached out his gloved hand, not touching her, just offering. "Come on." For the briefest moment, she hesitated. Should she trust him? Should she risk going with a stranger when she had a child to protect? But then a harsh gust of wind struck them, rattling the station windows. Thunder boomed close, too close. A storm like that could swallow a person whole out on the plains. And this man, he looked like someone who didn't walk away from people who needed him. The baby whimpered. She tightened her hold. Finally, she placed her hand in Eli's. It fit there as though it had been waiting. Without another word, he guided her away from the station, away from the stairs, and the ride to the Calder Ranch felt like drifting through a half-remembered dream. The woman clung to the saddle behind Eli, the baby nestled securely between her and the warmth of his back. She didn't know how she managed to stay balanced. Her body ached. Her head throbbed, and exhaustion weighed her eyelids like stones. But Eli rode steady, never once jolting or rushing the horse. It was as though he sensed every moment she needed a gentler pace. The plains stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grass bending under the rising storm winds. Dark clouds rolled overhead, heavy and swollen with rain. But before the first drops fell, Eli guided the horse through a wooden gate and up a long dirt road leading to a homestead tucked between two low hills. The Calder Ranch, from a distance, it looked modest, just a farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a barn, a chicken coop, and a few grazing horses. But as they drew closer, the place radiated something deeper. It felt lived in, safe, rooted, like the world here moved slower, quieter, kinder. Eli swung off the horse and helped her down with surprising gentleness for such a rugged man. He didn't say anything, he rarely did, but his hand lingered a breath longer on her arm, steadying her until he was sure she wouldn't fall. She noticed he kept his movements calm and unthreatening, cautious as though she were a frightened animal that might startle. A woman stepped out onto the porch just as the rain began to fall. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with silver threaded through her dark hair and warm eyes that missed nothing. Eli called her. She called over the storm, hands on her hips. You ride out for supplies and bring home a whole person instead? Or did the wind blow her into your path? Eli gave a single shake of his head. She needs help, May. May Calder's sharp gaze softened instantly when it fell on the trembling woman and the tiny face peeking from the swaddling cloth. Her entire demeanor shifted. She hurried off the porch, skirts swishing, and reached for the young woman before she could apologize for dripping water all over the ground. Oh, sweetheart, May murmured, voiced like warm bread from an oven, you're soaked through. Come inside quick, and that little one will catch cold. Eli, get the fire going. Eli obeyed without a word, slipping past them into the house. May guided the young woman inside, her hands gentle but firm. The moment she crossed the threshold, warmth enveloped her, the smell of wood smoke, herbs drying from the rafters, and something baking in the oven. Her knees wobbled from the sudden safety of it all. May eased her into a cushioned chair near the hearth. What's your name, darling? The woman swallowed hard, shame burning her cheeks. I don't know. May paused only a heartbeat before lifting the baby from her arms with expert familiarity. Memory loss? Injury? Don't you worry. You're safe now. Safe. The word made her throat tighten. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed to hear it. Eli returned carrying blankets and a kettle, setting them near the fire. Though he said nothing, he rarely did. His presence filled the room like a steady heartbeat. He moved with purpose, lighting the fire, boiling water, retrieving a clean cloth for the baby. He didn't hover, didn't stare, didn't pry. He simply did what needed doing. May caught the woman watching him and smiled knowingly. My nephew doesn't talk much, but he's got more heart than most men with full speeches. Eli's ears reddened slightly, but he didn't protest. The woman exhaled shakily. I don't know why he helped me. May draped a thick quilt around her shoulders. Because you needed help, and that's all Eli ever needs to know. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, but inside the small farmhouse, the fire crackled softly and the baby cooed in May's arms. The woman felt the first fragile bloom of hope take root inside her. For the first time since she stepped off that train. She wasn't alone. She had shelter, she had warmth, and she had Eli Calder silent, steady, watching over her with a quiet protectiveness she didn't yet understand. The first night at the Calder Ranch passed in a haze of exhaustion, fear, and unexpected gentleness. When the woman awoke the next morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the small bedroom May had given her. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, until she felt the soft rise and fall of the baby sleeping beside her. Only then did the memories rush back: the train, the storm, Eli's steady hand helping her down from the saddle, and May's warm voice saying, "You're safe now. Safe, but nameless." She sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her temple. The throbbing had eased, but her mind was still foggy, like pages missing from a book. She tried to remember anything: her home, her family, a childhood moment, even the shape of her own name, but each attempt felt like pushing through thick mud. Every memory slipped just out of reach. A soft knock came at the door. May peeked in with a smile. "Morning, sweetheart. I figured you might be hungry." She held a tray with warm porridge, fresh bread, and tea. The woman managed a grateful whisper. "Thank you for everything." "No thanks needed. Eli brought you here for a reason." May's eyes twinkled knowingly. "He has an eye for people who carry hurt." The woman looked down, embarrassed. "I wish I could tell you who I am. I feel like a ghost." May set the tray on the bedside table. "Memory's a tricky thing. Sometimes it comes all at once. Sometimes it returns in pieces. And sometimes—" She gently smoothed the woman's hair. "It waits until you feel safe enough to remember." The woman swallowed hard. "So what do I call myself? I can't keep saying I don't know every time someone asks." May paused thoughtfully. "Names can be borrowed until the right one finds you. If you want something temporary, we can pick one." The woman glanced at the sleeping baby, his tiny hand curled around her finger. "I don't even know if he's mine." May's expression softened. "Well, he sure looks at you like he belongs with you. That counts for something." Later that day, Eli returned from the barn, brushing hay from his coat. He glanced at her through the kitchen doorway, just a flicker of concern in his eyes before returning to sharpening his tools on the porch. He didn't speak, but every small action he took seemed to revolve around creating a quiet space where she wouldn't feel cornered. May leaned closer to her and whispered, "That man would give the shirt off his back for you without asking why. Take your time trusting him, but don't doubt his heart." The woman found herself studying his deliberate movements. The gentle way he handled animals, the way he checked the horizon as though expecting trouble. He was a man who held burdens silently, but he offered steadiness like a lifeline. Later, when May was tending to supper, Eli stepped inside, boots muddy from riding. He hesitated before speaking, as if choosing each word with care. "I went into town," he said quietly, "asked at the depot. Checked yesterday's passenger lists." Her breath caught. "And?" "No one reported you missing." He looked at her gently, almost apologetically. "You weren't traveling under any name they knew." A hollow ache filled her chest. "So I really don't exist." "You do," Eli said, simple and steady. "Just don't remember yet." Something inside her loosened, some tension she didn't know she'd been holding. She looked at him. "What do I call myself until I remember something?" Eli's gaze lowered to the baby. He shrugged lightly. "You'll know when it feels right." But she didn't, not yet. Still, she wasn't completely lost anymore. Because Eli, silent, patient, unwavering, had already begun searching for her name, even when she couldn't search for it herself. The days that followed settled into a fragile rhythm. The woman still nameless helped May around the house as much as her strength allowed, rocked the baby whenever he fussed, and spent long quiet moments staring out across the wide plains, hoping a memory might rise from the horizon. Eli kept mostly to his chores, mending fences, tending horses, riding out early and returning late, but she always felt his presence nearby. A quiet guardian in dusty boots and a weather-worn coat. The baby was usually calm, his soft breaths and tiny fingers a source of comfort she clung to, even though she didn't know their true connection. But on the fifth night, something changed. It started with a faint wheeze, a little rasp when the baby inhaled. She noticed it while rocking him after supper. At first, she thought it was just fatigue or the chill from the earlier rain. But an hour later, the rasp grew louder. His small body felt warmer than normal, his skin flushed. Her heart seized with fear. "May?" Her voice trembled as she hurried into the kitchen. "Something's wrong." May immediately took the baby, pressing her palm gently to his forehead, then listening close to his breathing. She frowned, the concern in her eyes unmistakable. "He's fevering." The woman's knees grew weak. "Fevering? Is it dangerous? For a newborn?" "It can be." May's voice was calm but urgent. "We need the doctor." Before she could move, Eli appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in the room. His gaze flicked to the baby, then to the woman's terrified face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't waste a second. He grabbed his coat from the peg. "I'll go." May stepped forward. "Eli, the storm's picking up again." "The doctor's near 10 miles away. I'll go," he repeated, voice low but firm as steel. He met the woman's tearful eyes just long enough to let her know he wouldn't fail them. Not now. Not ever. Then strode out into the darkness. The moment the door closed, the wind howled across the ranch, rattling the shutters. Rain began to hammer the roof, turning the plains into a blur of shadows and water. Every minute felt like an hour. May wrapped the baby in warm cloths, placing him near the fire, checking his breathing over and over. The woman kneeled beside them, hands shaking, whispering to the child she wasn't sure she'd birthed, but felt connected to in a way that defied reason. "Please," she murmured, voice breaking, "stay with me. Don't leave me too. I don't know who I am, but I don't want to lose you." The baby whimpered softly, struggling for breath. May placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're doing everything right, sweetheart. Just keep him warm. Talk to him. Let him know he's safe." But she didn't feel safe at all. Not with the storm raging, not with the baby's breaths shallow and uneven. Not with the memory of waking alone on that train pressing down on her. Hours crawled by. Outside, hooves pounded through mud. The door flung open. Eli stumbled in, soaked to the bone, carrying the doctor's medical bag. Behind him, the doctor himself pushed inside, wiping his glasses, muttering about the fool who dared ride through a storm like this. Eli didn't defend himself. He only pointed toward the hearth. The woman watched, breath held, as the doctor examined the baby, listening, checking temperature, mixing powders with water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor looked up. "He'll be all right," he said. "Just a fever. A strong one, but caught in time." Relief broke through her like sunlight. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears falling freely. Eli exhaled a sound so quiet she barely heard it. But the look he gave her and the baby was unmistakable. He had feared losing them too. Later that night, as the baby slept peacefully at last, the woman sat beside him, watching Eli wring rainwater from his coat by the fire. She whispered, voice raw, "You saved him." Eli shook his head. "Just did what needed doing." But the truth was clear. He hadn't just saved the baby. He had saved her. Again. The baby recovered slowly over the next few days, and with every steady breath he took, the woman felt herself unclench a little more. She stayed close to him, hardly daring to leave his side even long enough to wash her face or drink tea. Eli, though quiet as always, made sure she never lacked anything clean water, wood by the fire, fresh blankets warmed in the sun. He didn't hover. He simply noticed and acted. For a moment, the ranch felt like a world suspended outside time, a small pocket of peace where storms couldn't reach and memories couldn't hurt her. That illusion broke on the fourth day. Eli had gone to town early for supplies, expecting a quiet morning. Sagebrush Junction was usually slow after a storm, townsfolk busy mending fences and patching roofs. But as he tied his horse outside the general store, he noticed a man standing near the hitching post, a tall, wiry fellow with a scar slicing down his jawline and eyes like a predator. Scanning the plains, Eli's boots slowed on the dirt. Most travelers carried dust on their coats, but this man's boots were polished, his hat too fine for a drifter. Trouble, clean, well-funded trouble. The stranger was speaking to the store owner in a low, sharp voice. "You seen her?" The man demanded. "Young woman. Pale, quiet, carrying a newborn." Eli's heartbeat didn't change, but something in him shifted, a stillness sharpening. The store owner shook his head. "Haven't seen anyone like that." "You asked the station master?" "Already did." The stranger's lips curled. "He said someone took her. Some cowboy." Eli felt the tension coil in the airtight, thin, dangerous. He stepped forward. "You looking for somebody?" The stranger turned. His expression was polite, but the coldness in his eyes betrayed him. "Depends who's asking," Eli called her. He didn't offer his hand. "You described a lot of women I ain't seen." The stranger gave a small, dismissive smile. "She's not just any woman, she's property." He said the word like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eli's jaw tightened. "A person ain't property." The stranger shrugged. "World doesn't care what you think, cowboy." Eli said nothing. Silence, for him, was a weapon sharper than words. The man leaned in. "If you see her, you let me know. She has something that doesn't belong to her." "A baby," Eli said flatly. The stranger's eyes gleamed. "So you have seen her?" Eli didn't blink. "I hear things." The stranger stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That girl is trouble. The baby, too. Better for everyone if I find them." Eli didn't move, didn't breathe. "But," the man continued, "if somebody's hiding her, well, things get unpleasant." When the stranger finally walked away, Eli's hand hovered dangerously close to the revolver at his hip. He went straight back to his horse. He didn't buy supplies. He didn't stop to speak to anyone else. He rode hard, faster than he had the night he'd gone for the doctor. Dust kicked up in clouds behind him as he tore across the plains. The name of the ranch pounding with every heartbeat. May. The woman. The baby. Danger is coming. By the time he reached the porch, May was hanging laundry. She took one look at his face and dropped a sheet. What happened? Eli didn't answer with words. His silence alone told her everything. Inside, the woman sat beside the cradle, humming softly. When she looked up at Eli, her smile faded instantly. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Eli removed his hat, running a hand through his wind-tangled hair. He rarely showed fear, almost never. But now there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. A warning. "There's a man looking for you," he said quietly. "And he ain't the type you want finding you." Her breath caught. Her arms wrapped protectively around the baby. Part of her had always known this moment would come. Even without memory, her body remembered fear. And now that fear had a shape, a direction, a man, a pursuer, Someone who wanted her or the baby dash found. Eli stepped closer. Voice low but steady. I'll keep you safe. He didn't say I'll try. He said I will, and she believed him. The next morning broke softly across the plains, painting the ranch in a gentle amber glow. Elara stepped outside with baby Lily bundled in her arms, the cold nipping at her cheeks. The air felt different today, lighter, but trembling with something new. She had slept under the same roof as Weston for the first time, though on opposite sides of the house, and the strangeness of it lingered on her skin like the warmth of a fire not fully faded. Weston was already outside, tightening a saddle strap on his horse. He looked the same as always, steady, unbothered by the world, but Elara noticed the small changes. The way his shoulders no longer sagged with distance. The way he paused when she stepped onto the porch, as if checking she was truly there and not a wandering dream. Morning, she said softly. He tipped his hat, eyes flicking briefly to Lily. Both of you sleep all right? Yes, she answered, surprised at the truth of it. Better than I expected. There was a fragile peace between them now, something like trust beginning to root. But the day held more than gentle beginnings. In the kitchen, Mrs. Havens was waiting with a thick folded document. Weston asked me to draw up something proper, she said, sliding it toward Elara. You should look it over. Elara touched the papers with trembling fingers. Guardianship forms. Legal protection. Proof that she and Lily belong somewhere. Proof that someone finally stood behind them. Her throat tightened. He did this? Mrs. Havens nodded kindly. That man doesn't say much, but when he chooses someone to protect, it's for life. Later, Elara found Weston repairing a fence by the creek. She approached slowly, heart restless. Why would you do this for me? She asked, voice barely above the whisper of water over stone. He didn't look up right away. Weston always chose his words with care, and she was learning that silence, to him, wasn't coldness. It was honesty being shaped. You needed a name, he finally said. And Lily needed someone who wouldn't walk off the way others have. He hammered one last nail, then turned to her fully. Figured maybe? You deserved steadier ground. His simplicity was a knife and a balm. Elara hugged Lily closer, unsure if she wanted to cry or step forward. But before she could answer, Weston's eyes sharpened. He glanced toward the trail leading to the station road. Rider coming. A lone figure approached, dust rising beneath the horse's hooves. As the man drew closer, dread slid like ice beneath Elara's ribs. She recognized the shape of that coat, that posture, someone from her past she had hoped never to see again. Her breath caught. No, not here. Not now. Weston stepped subtly in front of her, not touching her, not questioning, just placing his silent strength between her and danger. You know him? He asked without looking back. Elara swallowed hard. Yes, and if he's here, it's not for anything good. The rider slowed to a stop a few yards away, his gaze sweeping over the ranch, then landing on Elara with a familiarity that made her knees weaken. Weston's voice dropped to a quiet, protective rumble. Stay behind me. For the first time since the train station, Elara felt her fear collide with something stronger, Weston's presence. Steady and immovable. And in that moment, she understood something powerful. She wasn't alone anymore. Not in name, not in heart, and definitely not in the fight that was about to walk straight onto this ranch. Why've you come? Weston called out. The man on horseback smiled that promised trouble. Ilara braced herself, her fingers trembling around Lily. Part 8 awaited them like a storm on the horizon. The rider reined in his horse with unnecessary force, dust curling around him like smoke. Ilara felt the old panic claw its way up her spine, the way it used to when every footstep behind her felt like a threat. Lily whimpered against her shoulder, sensing her mother's fear. Weston didn't move. He stood planted like a wall, silent, broad, unshakable, his presence blocking the man's direct path to her. Ilara realized that Weston's silence didn't mean he lacked emotion. It meant he chose carefully where to place it. And right now, he was placing all of it between her and danger. The rider's eyes were narrow and probing as he finally took off his hat. "Ilara," he said, with a false gentleness that made her stomach twist. "You're a hard woman to find." Weston's jaw flexed. "She isn't looking to be found." The man's lips curled upward, amused rather than intimidated. "So you're the quiet hero I've heard about. The one who scooped her up at the station like a lost pup." Weston didn't react. But Ilara felt the shift in him, the tightening of his stance, the readiness. "What do you want?" She forced out, clutching Lily tighter. The man rolled his shoulders. "Same thing I always did. What belongs to me?" Ilara flinched. Weston didn't. "She doesn't belong to you," Weston said calmly, but with steel that seemed to echo across the open land. The man's gaze flicked down to the baby. "And the child?" "She's got debts tied to her. Same as her mother." "There are no debts here," Weston said. "You should ride on." The rider chuckled darkly. "You think some papers and the presence of one mute cowboy is going to change the fact that she owes me?" He gestured lazily toward the ranch. "You really think you can protect her?" Ilara stepped forward then, surprising even herself. "You're not taking Lily, and you will not touch me again. Ever." The rider's expression shifted, mocking, dissolving into something more venomous. "You forget, girl. I know every trick you've used to run before. And I know exactly how far you'll go to keep that child breathing." He leaned forward in the saddle. "You don't want me as an enemy." Weston finally spoke again, slow and even, like each word was its own warning. "You should leave before this goes someplace you won't walk away from." Something in his tone, quiet but deadly sure, made the rider hesitate. Weston's hand hovered near the grip of his holster, not touching it, simply reminding the man that silence didn't mean softness. The rider looked. Between them, Weston's unbroken calm and Ilara's trembling resolve. For a moment, the air was stretched so tight it felt like it might snap. Finally, the man smirked, though unease flickered in his eyes. "All right, I'll go," he said as he tugged the reins. "But don't fool yourself. This isn't finished. I'll be back for what's mine. And next time, you won't see me coming." He turned his horse and rode off, the dust trail swallowing him whole. Ilara sagged with a shaky breath, knees threatening to give way. Weston turned instantly, steadying her with a hand on her elbow, gentle, but firm enough to keep her upright. "You're safe," he said quietly. "As long as you're here, no one touches you or Lily." Her throat tightened. "He's not going to stop." "No," Weston agreed. "But neither will I." The promise hung between them, heavy, solid, real. Ilara realized then that the man who had once stood silently beside her at the train station had become something she never expected, her shield. Her name, her home, but the danger wasn't gone. It was just waiting for nightfall. The days after the confrontation with the stranger were tense, though quiet in the outward sense. Ilara stayed close to Lily, keeping the baby wrapped against her chest as she watched the plains with cautious eyes. The sun rose and fell over the Calder Ranch, casting long shadows across the fences, the barn, and the gentle slope of the hills. But even as the world seemed peaceful, there was an unspoken understanding. The danger they had faced might return, and when it did, they had to be ready. Weston moved around the ranch as if nothing had changed, yet every step he took was deliberate. He checked the perimeter fences, walked the paths the stranger could have taken, and made subtle adjustments to the way he cared for the horses and livestock, all silent preparations that spoke louder than words ever could. He didn't need to say that he was protecting them. His actions did it for him. Ilara watched him work from the porch, Lily resting against her shoulder. She couldn't name the feelings rising in her chest: gratitude, fear, admiration, but she could feel them pressing together, creating something entirely new. The thought that maybe she didn't have to face the world alone anymore. Maybe she could have someone to fight beside. Someone who would not leave, no matter what storms came. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, Ilara approached Weston. Lily was asleep in the small bassinet May had prepared, the soft breathing of the child a reminder of how fragile their safety still was. Ilara's fingers nervously twisted the hem of her dress. "Weston," she began, her voice hesitant. I'm not sure how to. Thank you. For everything. For the baby, for me." Weston glanced at her, then back at the fading sunlight on the horizon. He didn't speak immediately. Then, in that calm, deliberate way of his, he said, "You don't have to thank me. We take care of our own out here." Ilara looked down at Lily, her heart swelling. She had always feared that she would never have a family, that she would wander through life as a ghost with nothing to hold on to. But now, holding this child, watching Weston tend to the ranch as if it were a fortress built for them, she realized something. Family didn't always come from the past. Sometimes it was chosen, built from trust and care and the willingness to protect each other. She hesitated, searching for the words. "I don't want to leave." "Not anymore." Weston's eyes met hers then, steady and unwavering. "You don't have to," he said simply. "Not if you don't want to." The weight of his words pressed into her chest in a comforting way. It wasn't just about staying. It was about choosing to stay. About choosing a life with someone who had silently, unflinchingly claimed her safety as his responsibility. About choosing a family for herself and Lily, for the first time since she had been left at that train station. Ilara felt a sense of belonging, not fleeting, not dependent on strangers' mercy, but real and solid. She had a name now, a home, and people who would stand by her no matter what came. Later that night, May brought her a warm quilt and whispered, "You see? You belong here. You both do." Ilara smiled down at Lily, brushing a strand of hair from the baby's face. "We do," she murmured, and in the quiet of the Calder Ranch, with the stars sparkling above the plains and the wind humming through the grass, Ilara realized something profound. A family was not just blood. It was love, protection, trust, and choice. And she had all of that now. Weston, silent as ever, settled into his chair nearby, watching over both of them. He didn't need to speak. His presence said everything. "You are safe. You are wanted. You are home." And for the first time since the train station, Ilara finally believed it. The storm of the past still lingered at the edges of memory, but she had a shield now, steady and strong. A home to return to, and a man who would not let anything take them from it. Tomorrow, they would face the world together. The train station was quiet in the early morning, bathed in a pale light that hinted at frost on the wooden platform. Elara stood clutching Lily in her arms, the baby wrapped snugly in a quilt May had made. The wind whispered across the tracks, tugging gently at her hair and the hem of her dress. This was the same platform where she had first been abandoned, where fear had first gripped her like a cold hand. And now she had returned, but this time she was not alone. Weston walked beside her, silent as ever, but his presence was a shield stronger than any steel. His boots clicked softly against the wood, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. She glanced up at him, taking in the familiar line of his jaw, the quiet strength in his posture, the gentleness that lay just beneath the surface of the rugged man who had rescued her from despair. He hadn't needed to speak, yet she had learned more from his silences than from any words she had ever heard. "I don't have a name," she whispered to him, more to herself than expecting an answer. The thought had been heavy on her mind these past days, even as she had found safety and belonging at the ranch. Papers could be signed. Guardianship could be legal. But her name, her identity, felt like the final piece of a life that had been shattered. Weston stopped, walking, and tilted his hat back slightly. His eyes met hers, calm, unwavering, yet tender. For a moment, she felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see every fear, every doubt, every fragment of a past she didn't fully remember. Then, quietly, he stepped closer, tilting his head toward her and Lily. "You do now," he said softly, his voice low and deliberate. The words struck her with clarity. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "I? What?" "You have a name now," he repeated, his hand brushing lightly against hers as he nodded toward the baby in her arms. "And a family. You're part of something that matters, something that will not leave you, no matter what comes." Tears pricked her eyes. It was not just the reassurance of safety, it was the recognition of belonging. For the first time since waking alone on that train, she felt herself rooted, seen, and named. She realized then that a name was more than letters. It was a promise, an identity, a bond forged in the quiet. Steady care of someone who had chosen to protect her and Lily with everything he had. She looked down at Lily, whose tiny eyes were still half closed, then back at Weston. His face, usually unreadable, carried a gentle, steadfast warmth. In that moment, she understood. The family she had feared she would never have had already claimed her. It was in his silences, in the way he watched over her, in the quiet insistence that they belonged together. Elara exhaled, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She stepped forward, letting Weston guide her gently, the baby nestled securely between them. The old fear of abandonment, Thrain, the stranger, the unknown faded into the background, replaced by a steady certainty. She had a name, a child, and a home. She had chosen and been chosen in return. The train whistle sounded faintly in the distance, a reminder of the life she had left behind and the journey she had endured. But for the first time, the platform no longer represented isolation. Instead, it marked a beginning, a life built on trust, courage, and the quiet heroism of a silent cowboy who had given her more than safety, had given her a place in the world. Weston extended his hand to her fully, and this time she took it without hesitation. Lily nestled against her chest as the three of them walked away from the station together. She could feel the warmth of his presence behind her, a constant promise that nothing would separate them again. "You do now," she whispered back to herself, letting the words sink in. She had a name. She had a family. And for the first time in her life, she truly felt whole. As they disappeared down the dusty path toward the Calder Ranch, the train platform faded behind them. The plains stretched wide, the future uncharted. But the three of them, Elara, Lily, and Weston, faced it together, bound not by blood alone, but by choice, courage, and an unspoken love that needed no words. The story that had begun in fear and abandonment ended here in hope and belonging.